Hi Scrappy friends, it's Paige Evans, and if you were lucky enough to get your hands on one of these embroidery kits from my Tricks and Treats collection, I want to show you some fun stitches that you can do to fill them up. So I am just taking the shapes and the floss and the needle out of the packaging, and I just want to reiterate and state that there is no right or wrong way to stitch these. It's totally up to you and the colors you want to use, the stitches you want to do. So I just want to give you some ideas, but take it and run with it. So here are the different shapes, and I want to start with this web with the black spider. So the web is printed with gray ink, so I'm going to use the gray thread that comes in the kit. It's a little bit darker than the gray that's printed on the die cut, but that is okay. And I generally start with about an arm span of thread. I've threaded it onto the needle, and I'm going to tie a knot at the opposite end. So give yourself about a 6-inch tail to begin with, tie a knot at the end, and then I'm just going to start. It doesn't really matter where you start. You can start at the end, you can start in the middle. The point is you just want to stitch the whole thing. So bring your needle up through a hole and go down through the next hole. So I'm going to do a back stitch, which means you bring your needle up through the next empty hole and bring it back down through the previous stitch. This is why it's called the back stitch, because you go back. Bring your needle up and out the next empty hole and go back through the previous hole. Now the back stitch actually uses twice as much thread, so there is another way that you can do this without using so much thread, since there's just the limited amount that comes in your kit. To not use as much thread, we're going to do a running stitch. So you bring your needle up through the next empty hole and go down the next empty hole. Bring your needle up through the next empty hole and go down through the next empty hole. Up through the next empty hole and down through the next empty hole. So this basically stitches it reminds me of butterfly trails or airplane trails, but it basically skips every other hole, like connecting them together. So then once you get to the end, you start stitching your way back through, and that's going to connect all of the holes together, so it's one solid line. So here I've reached the end of this straight line doing the running stitch, and now I can start going backwards. So bringing up through the last hole and going down the next hole. From the back side, bring your needle up through the next hole, and on the front side, the thread gets caught on all of these ends and stuff. You just have to be patient and go down through the next hole to fill in that gap. So you're doing the running stitch again, but since it's opposite, look, my thread got looped around again. Since it's opposite, you're connecting those gaps together with this stitching. So this is the running stitch. It's a modified back stitch so that you don't use as much thread. And if your needle or if your thread gets jumbled up and bunched up, just be patient, carefully untangle it, and continue on your merry way of stitching. So park yourself in front of Netflix or Hulu, whatever you'd like to watch, and happy stitching. Here's what it looks like once you've finished that entire straight line. So you simply move on to the next section, doing the running stitch, or the back stitch, or the chain stitch, which I will show you coming up a bit later, but I just want to show you how I am continuing on. Doesn't matter where you start, doesn't matter where you stop, you just need to stitch the entire shape. What happens when you run out of thread? Let me show you. So I think I can get a couple more stitches with this length of gray thread, doing my modified back stitch, just the running stitch. I think I can do this last stitch. Once you've run out of thread, flip it over to the back side. Pass your needle underneath a stitch that's close by, and then pull until a little loop forms. Pass your needle through the loop, pull it taut, not too tight or you'll tear it, and then trim off, leaving about a 1/2 inch. So I am just about finished stitching around the spider web. Here's my last stitch, so let me show you one more time how to tie it off on the back side. Pass your needle underneath a stitch close by, pull until there's a loop, pass your needle through the loop, pull it taut until a knot forms, and then trim it off, leaving about a 1/4 inch of thread. Ta-da! Now I want to stitch the spider using a back stitch. So once again, I'm going to trim an arm span of black thread, a knot on the end. I'm starting at the end of one of the spider legs. So pass your needle up through the knot and go up through the hole, and go down the next empty hole. Bring your needle up through the first hole again and go down through the second hole again. So I've done a double stitch to get it started. Now bring your needle up through the next empty hole and then pass your needle underneath that first stitch, pull it taut, and go back down through the hole you just came out of. So you linked them together. That's why it's called a chain link stitch. Bring your needle up through the next empty hole, pass it underneath the previous stitch, pull the thread taut, and go back down through the hole you just came out of. And you've got your next chain link done. Bring your needle up through the next empty hole, pass your needle underneath the previous stitch, and go back down through the hole you just came out of. I love the chain link stitch, the texture that it adds. It's super thick and luscious, and yeah, so much texture. So this is another one of the stitches that I use a lot on my scrapbooking and on these embroidery die cuts. So I did the modified back stitch for the web. I'm doing the chain stitch for the spider. And if you are starting the next leg, you need to do the double stitch in the beginning again. The angle is just too tight to link it through the previous stitch. So when you're starting the next leg, do the double stitch and then continue with that linking stitch. So it's a little more complicated with short straight lines like this, but if you're doing a curved edge like the ghost or the witch hat or the flower, you can do the chain link stitch all the way around without having to start over at a straight line, doing the double stitch and then the chain stitch. It's kind of hard to see the chain link stitch with this black thread, but it's a lot easier to see with the lighter colored threads. So here is the last stitch for this second leg of the spider, passing my needle underneath, trying not to get tangled on all of these web parts. And then I'll speed it up so you can see the chain stitch on the legs, and then I do the chain stitch around the entire spider as well. So stitching definitely takes some time. And again, there's no right or wrong way to do this. Whatever stitch you feel like doing, the back stitch, the modified back stitch, the chain stitch, French knots, whatever you want. You just want to make sure that you stitch through all of the holes. That's the name of the game. That's all there is to it. So once you have finished stitching, same thing. Flip it over and tie your knot on the back of the die cut. Trim it off, and my first shape is finished. 1 down, 7 to go. So it's definitely a time commitment, but I love the entire process. Sometimes, friends, I even add my own stitching. For example, this ghost has the light pink outline, but there's no stitching holes. So put a foam mat underneath, grab a paper piercer, and poke a hole about every 1/8 inch around the entire shape, and then you've added custom holes for stitching. So since the kit doesn't come with all of the colors, I do have these embroidery thread kits in my shop, and it comes with 16 threads. It's going to match these colors that aren't included in the embroidery kit. So pick one of these up from my shop so that you can add even more details to the embroidery shapes in this kit. For the Halloween, I am doing a modified back stitch again. So I've threaded my needle with my own purpley pink thread from my kit, from my shop. And I've started at the top right of the E. Really doesn't matter where you start as long as you stitch through every hole. So I'm going up and down, up and down. Try not to get too frustrated when my thread catches on the die cut, but it's bound to happen. So just be careful that you're not pulling your thread too tight so that you tear the paper. Just pull it taut. That's what I like to say, not too tight. So when you get to these edges of the E, you just need to make sure you connect all of the holes together. There's no right or wrong. Just stitch all of the holes. I'm going to say that over and over again. So I'm just about finished. Flip it over to the back, tie your knot, trim the excess thread, leaving about 1/4 inch, and the Halloween is done. Please remember that I used my own threads from my custom package of DMC threads. So you're not going to get all of those colors in the Tricks and Treats embroidery kit. Here I'm doing the chain stitch again. So remember, the first stitch is the double stitch. You go up and down through the same pair of holes. And then to do the chain stitch, bring your needle up and out through the next empty hole, pass your needle underneath the previous stitch, and my thread just got caught around the pumpkin, so carefully untangle it and go back down through the hole you just came out of. Bring your needle up through the next empty hole, pass your needle underneath the previous stitch to link them together, and go back down through the previous hole. So I'm doing tone-on-tone stitching. I used dark orange for the dark orange pumpkin, and I'm using light orange for this yellow pumpkin. Here is a sped up look at the chain stitching on this yellow pumpkin. It's soothing to me, it's relaxing. I love hand stitching from the threads that the embroidery kit comes with. I would just use orange for both of these and the pink. All right, so I did a chain stitch around the ghost, and now for these flowers, it's so easy. You just stitch through those sets of holes around the flower. So you go up one hole and down through the coordinating hole. Up through the next empty hole. Doesn't matter if you start at the top or the bottom, you just need to stitch through both holes of each petal of the flower. So up and down, move on to the next flower, go up and down through each petal. Tie your knot on the back, and there you have it. Now we're going to do a French knot. So I've got my purpley pink thread. Bring your needle up through the hole, and I've got a knot on the back. Wrap your thread twice around the needle. Jab the end through the hole again, slide the knot down to the end of the needle, and then bring your needle through the hole, and that creates the knot. One more time. Bring your needle up through the hole. Pull until the thread catches. Grab your needle with your right hand and use your left hand to wrap the thread twice around. Poke your needle through the hole. Slide the knot down to the end of the needle and then pull the needle all the way through. One more time. And that is the French knot. Super easy, super fun. One more time. It's easier to have a longer piece of thread to do this, otherwise it's kind of hard to wrap the thread around the needle twice. So do a French knot through all those pink dots. Here is a flower, and around these mint leaves, I'm poking my own holes to do the back stitch or the modified back stitch with the mint thread that comes in my thread pack from my shop. I also added holes around the yellow middle part. It didn't come with holes around that yellow middle section, but I added my own holes. I finished the stitching, so here is a look at all 8 finished pieces. So you can see I've done a combination of back stitch, chain stitch, French knots, using the colors that came in the embroidery kit, but also my own custom colors, so I have all the colors. Let me know if you have any questions about these. I hope you enjoyed learning how to do these different kinds of stitches. You don't have to make them the same. You can choose to do your own. You don't have to add the additional hand stitching, but I love the texture that it adds, the pop of color, and these make my heart so happy, and I cannot wait to use these on my scrapbooking layouts and the 4x4 mini album that comes with Tricks or Treats. Again, let me know if you have any questions, and I hope you have a happy scrappy day.